The family worship center had already closed its doors to the public hours before, but deep within the vast sanctuary, something unusual was happening. Something not meant for the cameras or the congregation. Word began to spread quietly among a select few that Frances Swaggart and her grandson, Pastor Gabriel Swaggart, were attending a private sermon, one that wasn't listed on the ministry's schedule, wasn't streamed online, and, according to insiders, was meant only for a handful of trusted church leaders. Yet somehow, word leaked. By the next morning, whispers were circulating through online faith groups and former ministry members. They talked about other churches. It wasn't a message, it was a warning. Something big is about to change at JSM. And for the first time in decades, Frances and Gabriel stood side by side, not just as grandmother and grandson, but as two spiritual authorities addressing what they claimed was the confusion and compromise spreading through modern Christianity. What they said that night, according to multiple witnesses, shocked everyone. The gathering nobody was supposed to record. The meeting took place in one of the smaller halls behind the main family worship center stage, a place usually reserved for closed staff meetings. But on this night, the setting was different. Candles lined the aisles, the lights were low, no microphones, no cameras. According to one insider, a longtime volunteer who attended, Frances herself requested that no cell phones or recording devices be brought inside. She said this wasn't about publicity, the insider claimed, it was about purity. Only about 40 people were present, including close Swaggart family associates, elders, and several youth pastors who serve under Gabriel's Crossfire Ministries. Gabriel opened the night with prayer, but from the very first words, those present knew this wasn't a typical devotional. His voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from a conviction that many said they had never seen from him before. Gabriel's opening line that shook the room. He began with a single sentence that would later spread across social media like wildfire. The biggest threat to the church isn't the world, it's the churches that have forgotten what the word really says. A stunned silence filled the room. Those words, reportedly directed toward the growing trend of celebrity preachers and entertainment-style services, hit hard, especially since the Swaggarts themselves are no strangers to fame or criticism. Gabriel continued, "We've built buildings bigger than our faith. We've put lights where we should have put prayer. And I'm not pointing at anyone, I'm pointing at all of us." But as the sermon went on, that disclaimer, "I'm not pointing at anyone," seemed to vanish. Witnesses claim Gabriel began referencing specific churches and well-known pastors, though without mentioning names. He spoke of mega-churches that look more like concert halls, of pastors who sell grace like it's merchandise, and of ministries that water down the gospel for views and applause. Then, he paused. From the back row, Frances Swaggart stood up slowly. Frances takes the microphone. Those who know Frances Swaggart know she rarely interrupts a sermon, especially her grandsons, but that night, she didn't wait for permission. Eyewitnesses say she walked straight to the podium, took the microphone, and looked across the small crowd with that same unwavering expression she's worn for decades, one that can silence a room without a single word. And then she said, "The Lord is tired of play acting. He's tired of these churches that look holy but have no holiness." A murmur swept through the hall. She wasn't just echoing Gabriel, she was amplifying him. They sing louder, but pray less. They dress the part, but don't live the part. And when the Spirit moves, they call it emotion instead of anointing. Every sentence hit like a hammer. Even those who had known Frances for years said she spoke that night with a rare intensity, almost as if decades of silence were breaking all at once. "Let me tell you something," she added, pointing upward. "If Jesus were to walk into half these churches today, they'd hand him a guest pass instead of a pulpit." The room erupted, not in applause, but in awe. The message hidden behind the message. For outsiders, this might sound like another fiery sermon, but for those inside the ministry, these remarks carried a deeper message, one many interpreted as a warning shot toward rival ministries that have publicly criticized the Swaggarts' way of preaching. Over the past few years, several contemporary pastors have accused Jimmy Swaggart Ministries, JSM, of being outdated, judgmental, or too focused on sin instead of love. But this secret sermon turned that narrative upside down. "They call us old-fashioned," Gabriel said midway through the night. "But if the old ways got people to heaven, then maybe it's not the ways that need changing. Maybe it's the people." That line reportedly made Frances tear up. "He's right," she whispered into the mic. We don't need to modernize the gospel. We need to memorize it again. Reactions among attendees. Several attendees later described the atmosphere as electric. Some wept. Others prayed quietly. One witness described seeing Gabriel walk off stage briefly in tears. Another recalled Frances clasping her hands tightly, saying, "We've lost reverence, and when reverence goes, revival can't stay." But the emotional charge wasn't just about conviction. It was also about confrontation. Because once the sermon ended, Gabriel reportedly turned to his grandmother and said something no one expected to hear out loud. Maybe the reason God's shaking the churches is because he's about to separate the real from the fake. The statement hung heavy. The shockwave that followed. The next morning, snippets of what was said began to appear in private Facebook groups and ministry chat threads. Some attendees, despite the no phones policy, had discreetly taken notes and sent them to trusted friends. Within 24 hours, those notes were screenshotted and shared publicly. Headlines began popping up on blogs. Frances Swaggart calls out hypocritical churches. Gabriel warns of a coming divide in Christianity. Inside the secret meeting that could change the Swaggart legacy. And then came the pushback. A well-known pastor from Texas reportedly responded on social media with a cryptic post. Some folks are still living in 1985, preaching fire but forgetting grace. Though he didn't mention names, fans knew exactly who he meant. But the response from JSM supporters was fierce. Thousands of comments poured in defending Frances and Gabriel, praising their courage to speak the truth when others only speak comfort. One fan wrote, "They're not attacking the church, they're protecting it from the inside." Frances's final words that night. Before the lights dimmed and the last prayer was said, Frances reportedly turned back to the microphone one last time. Her voice, though softer now, carried the weight of a lifetime of ministry, loss, and endurance. "We're not here to compete with other churches. We're here to call them back. The enemy doesn't need to destroy the church if he can distract it. And distraction is what's killing us." With that, she bowed her head. The crowd rose to its feet in silent prayer. No applause, no noise, just reverence. Behind the doors, what it meant for JSM. After the sermon, Gabriel reportedly met privately with a few key leaders, including members of Sun Life Broadcasting Network. Sources claim the discussion centered on how JSM should position itself in the coming months, especially amid growing tension between traditional and modern evangelical circles. One insider summarized it like this: "They're not changing direction, they're doubling down. They feel called to be the voice crying out in the wilderness again." And perhaps that's exactly what this secret sermon was. Not a rebuke, but a renewal. Still, for many watching from the outside, questions remain. Why was the meeting secret? Why now? And what did Frances and Gabriel mean when they said the separation was coming? Gabriel was sitting in his office reviewing notes for the upcoming Crossfire service when the phone on his desk began to buzz. It wasn't the usual line, it was the private one, reserved for senior ministry leaders only. On the other end was Pastor R. Thomas, a well-known Southern Baptist preacher from Dallas and an old family acquaintance. His tone was firm but polite. "Brother Gabriel," he began, "I watched your family grow this ministry from the ashes, but tell me straight, did you really say that other churches have forgotten what the word says?" Gabriel hesitated. He knew denial would sound dishonest, but full confirmation could spark more backlash. "Pastor," he replied carefully, "I said the truth as God laid it on my heart. We're not accusing, we're awakening." A long silence followed. Then came the words that hinted at deeper conflict. "Awakening or attacking, son, you'd better know the difference, because right now, half the South thinks you fired a shot." The call ended, but the warning lingered like thunder on the horizon. When Gabriel told Frances about the call, she didn't flinch. Instead, she poured 2 cups of black coffee and motioned for him to sit. "They'll misunderstand you, Gabriel," she said quietly. "They misunderstood your grandfather too. Every prophet gets painted as proud before he's proven right." Gabriel leaned forward. "But what if this divides the church, Grandma? What if we're the cause?" Frances looked out the window toward the cross that towers over the family worship center ground. "Division isn't caused by truth," she answered. "It's caused by people who can't handle it." Her conviction, steady and unshaken, reminded Gabriel why people still called her the matriarch of JS. 3. Social media eruption. By Monday afternoon, hashtags began trending across Christian Twitter. Hashtag Swaggart Sermon, hashtag Old Fire New Fight, A Holiness or Hype. Clips from attendees' notes and paraphrased quotes flooded TikTok and Facebook. Memes appeared showing Frances's famous line, "If Jesus walked into half these churches today, they'd hand him a guest pass instead of a pulpit." While supporters celebrated her boldness, critics accused the Swaggarts of arrogance. One influencer pastor posted, "We don't need holiness police, we need humble hearts." Yet, under that same post, thousands of comments defended the Swaggarts, calling them voices of accountability. The controversy had gone global. The closed-to-door meeting. On Tuesday, JSM leadership called an emergency staff meeting, cameras off, phones confiscated. Inside the main conference room sat Gabriel, Frances, several board members, and the director of Sun Life Broadcasting Network. The topic, damage control. The director spoke first. "We're getting calls from partners asking if this was an official stance. Do we clarify or let it ride?" Frances's response stunned everyone. "We don't clarify the gospel, it clarifies us." Gabriel followed. "If people think we attack them, they need to look again at what we said. We talked about compromise, not competition." A senior board member suggested releasing a mild public statement to calm donors, but Frances refused. "The minute we explain boldness, we lose it," she said. And with that, the meeting ended. Memories of Jim. Later that evening, Gabriel returned to his study. On the shelf above his desk rested an old photograph, his grandfather, Jimmy Swaggart, preaching in the 1980s with tears streaming down his face. That image haunted Gabriel. For years, he'd watched Jimmy's rise, fall, and redemption shape the family legacy. He knew every sermon carried the weight of that history. And so, alone in the quiet, he whispered the confession he hadn't shared even with Frances. "Sometimes I preach hard because I'm afraid of failing like he did." He paused. "And sometimes, I wonder if I already have." Those words were never meant for anyone's ears, but fate had other plans. The accidental recording. Among the 40 attendees at the secret sermon had been a young volunteer named Eli Marston, a recent Bible college graduate assigned to audio setup. Though all phones were banned, Eli's smartwatch had been recording part of the sermon automatically through a voice note app. A week later, as curiosity spread, Eli uploaded a short audio snippet to a private Discord group. Within hours, someone leaked it to Reddit and then to YouTube. The 52-second clip captured Frances's voice saying, "The Lord is tired of play acting. He's tired of churches that look holy but have no holiness." Within 24 hours, it had 2 million views. Christian commentators debated its tone, journalists dissected every syllable, and talk shows asked, was Frances Swaggart condemning modern churches or calling for revival? Eli, terrified of what he'd done, went into hiding, but the viral moment was unstoppable. Inside the storm. Behind the scenes, Gabriel faced mounting pressure. Several affiliate pastors threatened to cut ties unless JSM clarified its stance. One message read, "We've stood with your family for 30 years, but our congregation feels attacked." Still, Gabriel refused to apologize. "Truth isn't an attack, it's a mirror," he told his team. "If they see something ugly in it, maybe it's because God's trying to show them something." Frances backed him publicly during a small Wednesday broadcast on Sun Life Radio. Without mentioning the scandal directly, she said, "Sometimes the shepherd has to shout because the wolves are loud." Listeners knew exactly what she meant. The unexpected support. Just as backlash peaked, a surprising message arrived from a major figure in the gospel world, Pastor C.A.C. Williams, leader of one of Atlanta's largest Pentecostal churches. Her text read, "Tell Frances and Gabriel thank you.